Hey guys, what's going on? James here with another booktube video. Today we're doing a sit down Saturday kind of deal, and we're going to try and do it in one take with the rays of God shining over my shoulder. So try and ignore that if you can. Quite distracting even for me because I can see it in the viewfinder. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about the dynamics between heroes and villains, antagonists and protagonists, basically what I think makes for a strong hero and a strong villain, and why actually I think that the current trend towards moving towards grey, shades of grey, is actually diluting our stories and making them kind of not worse but a bit weaker. So let's first of all talk about obviously what is a hero and a villain. Obviously I think we all know that the protagonist is the driving force behind the story. He's normally the good guy, the one we're rooting for, and the antagonist or the villain is usually the person trying to stop him. Not all protagonists and antagonists are sort of meld perfectly into that good and evil dynamic, that villain-hero relationship. There are some stories that, mostly like contemporaries and things, where you can't really define normal human beings as evil and good. They're more complex people. They do good and bad things for sure, but not all the time is that good-evil relationship there. What I think really makes, we'll start with heroes, because the protagonist really is obviously the driving force behind any story. In order to care about the outcomes of a story, we really need to root for the protagonist. So how do you accomplish that as a writer, and what makes us root for these people? Mostly, in some way, it's a relatability kind of thing. There is going to be even with the most outlandish heroes that you can think of, the most bizarre, the most unique sort of people that are as far detached from what you and I do as possible, there's going to be something about that person that you can relate to. There's going to be something that gives you an emotional investment in that person. And that's really sort of the core of this whole thing, is an emotional investment and a relatability in that. For example, if we take Superman, Superman is by and large the most unrealistic character ever. He's invincible, he can fly, super strong, all these powers. You and I can't relate to that. But what we can relate to is his desire to do good things, his desire to protect people that he cares about, his awkward shyness in terms of some social situations. You know, these are things we can relate to, and these are things that get us invested in the character emotionally. The real thing that really pumps you forward in terms of rooting for a hero is wanting him to succeed in what he's doing. And to do that, you really need to build this guy as someone that you can root for. If you're not wanting to cheer for the hero in accomplishing what he's trying to accomplish, your story is not going to be as strong. This is why I think shades of grey do not work too well, but we'll discuss that more in a moment, because the other thing that really drives you forward in a hero relationship, and getting invested in a hero's struggle, is the antagonist or the villain. The main role of a villain or an antagonist in a story is to make you more invested in the success of a hero. So one of the things that you see bandied about in writing advice and things is that you should put your hero through a struggle, you should put your protagonist through a struggle in achieving their goals. The most direct way of doing that is to have an antagonist for them, someone to foil their plans along the way, someone to really highlight how good this person is. The chief role of a villain or an antagonist is to be the person that you boo for, to make you want to cheer more for the hero. This is something you see all the time. It's why the idea of a Dark Lord is so popular. A Dark Lord is, yes, a two-dimensional I am bad guy villain, but it's a villain that you can identify as a villain, and you can not feel bad when your protagonist wins one over on him. So that's really sort of what I think the role of an antagonist should be. It's someone who is obviously there to serve the story. It's there to provide conflict for the hero, but ultimately it's someone that you also emotionally invest in the opposite way. You can still relate to some of their personality traits, but they should be things that you relate to in so far as you hate them. That you're like, you'll see a person who's the antagonist and you'll be like, that sort of behaviour fucking irritates me, that sort of behaviour is not on, it makes me angry, it makes me want to see you fail. And that gives you more of an emotional investment in the hero and his story, which is obviously the main story of the book. So that is the sort of thing that drives it forward. It's that interplay between a protagonist and an antagonist, which really builds an ultimate emotional investment in seeing the hero succeed and the villain fail. And that's what gives you that ultimate release payoff at the end of the story when you see the hero do that and the villain does fail. Or it's what makes you fucking tears your heart out of your chest when it's a tragedy and the hero ultimately does fail in his goals and the antagonist comes out on top, or any sort of permutation of that. You can't have that sort of emotional climax and release unless you really do get invested in a hero's struggle. And so let's talk now about why I think Shades of Grey are sort of diluting that experience. There's a lot of talk. Every time I see writing advice here, and the question is like, how do I make my villain more compelling? How do I make him not just two-dimensional? And the answer that you always get is, you have to make him sympathetic, you have to make him relatable, try using Shades of Grey. I think Shades of Grey are probably one of the most detrimental things to the overall investment in a story if you go too far with it. It's okay to dabble in either way. Like, it's okay to have your hero be ultimately a good guy, rooting for him the whole way, but sometimes he might have like one thing that he does that's a bit dodgy, or a bit weak. Those are character flaws. They're not like, it's not Shades of Grey. People say that in like Game of Thrones, Ned Stark has got like Shades of Grey because he took in Jon Snow as a bastard, and he's like, oh, you were dishonorable and you cheated on your wife. Like, that doesn't make him like a villain. It just makes him a human with foibles. Like, what he does throughout the story is not like morally repugnant. You don't want to see him fail just because he took Jon Snow in as a baby. And then on the other hand, when you've got villains who are Shades of Grey, I don't think any good villain is really Shades of Grey. Like, going back to the Game of Thrones example, like, people say like, oh, Jaime Lannister is really a compelling villain because he is Shades of Grey. I would argue that actually Jaime Lannister is not Shades of Grey. He is black and white, but he started off black and has become white as the story goes on. And he sort of flip-flops between the two, and it's done kind of well. Like, it's done really well. He's probably like, he is a compelling character, but I would struggle to say he's a villain or an antagonist. But then you've got someone like Cersei, who really doesn't operate in any Shades of Grey. She's absolutely morally repugnant in almost every sense, and the only redeeming quality, as Tyrion points out, is the fact that she loves her kids. But does that make her a sort of good person that you want to root for? Like, no, of course not. It doesn't matter. Like, all of the villains that you remember that are memorable are not these Shades of Grey kind of people. They might have a redemption arc where they go from bad to good, and a hero could have a tragic fall where he goes from good to bad. But a character that exists in a middle ground between the two is just impossible really to root for either way. You don't know whether to boo him or to cheer him, so when things happen to him, you just throw your fucking hands up and you go, well, okay, like, that happened. Like, this is what I think is like, let's talk about just an addendum to this sort of topic, is the idea of a strong character. I hear it a lot as like the term strong female character. We need more strong female characters, and it's always used like the idea of a strong character for some reason is always couched in this conversation of physical strength, when really it should be more about a strongly identifiable and relatable character, something that you can identify, point out, and say, you know, this is good or this guy is bad. I don't want him to succeed, I want them to fail, and you can point out the reasons. A weak character is a character with one, no agency in the story at all, and two, a character that you just can't pin down. Like, what are they? Who cares? Like, you don't care about them because they're nothing. They're like a nothing character that blends into the background, and that's where, in the past, I think female characters have fallen into that gap where either they are just nothing side characters to the hero that you don't care about them. And like that's the problem, because they were never developed to have an identifiable, relatable goal, or they never got in the way of anything, and they were just like a nothing character. And they never, obviously, then you have the other point is they weren't main characters in the story to begin with, so they didn't really have any control over the story or any sort of goals or anything, and that sort of feeds into each other. I've gotten a bit off topic there, talking about strong female characters, but that's one thing that's really sort of bothered me in discussions about things book related recently, especially because like we need more strong female characters, and that just means they can shoot people in their head. Like it's not what a strong character is. I wouldn't point at a male character who could just stab people and there was nothing more to him but that he could stab people and go, yeah, that's a strong character. I get a real sense for his sort of character and his person through the fact that he can do more stabs than everyone else. But that's, you know, my own personal foible. I just glanced over here and saw that I have on the desk here Firefly, the series by Joss Whedon. It's a great sci-fi western series that was cancelled after one season because Joss Whedon can't manage projects properly and decided to use Fox to distribute it, and they hated it because it's not about sort of the typical hero. And that's why I bring it up, because these people are like space pirate smuggler guys, and they kill people and they, you know, rob and they steal and they cheat their way through life. But they're all fucking likable people. None of them are complete scum. You know, even the characters that you think like, oh, well, like he's doing some real dodgy shit. Is he going to turn on people? It's not because he's a shade of grey. You know, it's not because he's a shade of grey through the whole story that you're concerned about that. You're concerned because he is good, essentially, and you're worried that he's going to join the bad guys' side. So even then, in a series that is about heroes doing morally grey things, you know, you don't have that grey area of whether or not they're good or not. You still cheer for them, you still root for them, no matter what they're doing, even if it is a little bit morally repugnant, a bit morally reprehensible. I've used the word repugnant a lot today. I'm feeling them R words a lot. So I think this has gone on quite long enough. I think you get the idea. I believe personally that heroes and villains should exhibit more strongly in the black or white of the spectrum. Those shades of grey don't really work for me, and I would argue that ultimately it doesn't really exist outside of the odd occasion where a character will sort of go more towards one side than the side they're currently on, and then ultimately probably go back or just go all the way to the other side. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this discussion, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and that's it. So I will see you next time.